She also has been a visiting scholar and lecturer at Central and East European Studies at Glasgow University and in the Department of Sociology at Lund University. She has been also a visiting associate professor at the Center for Russian, East European and Eurasian Studies, Stanford. Professor Osypchuk's recent project examines the Russian-Ukrainian war through the eyes of Ukrainians. As our audience may know by now, Russia's full-scale and unjustified war on Ukraine has been predominantly portrayed from the Russian perspective. This seminar presents an opportunity for students and professors at the University of São Paulo to gain a broader viewpoint. Before giving the floor to Professor Anna Osypchuk, I would like to thank Marina Slirasenko Barreto, a PhD candidate in this program, for connecting me with Anna. Marina Slirasenko, Cláudia Serachuk, Henrique Wittschmidt, Professors Felipe Feller, Vicente Ferrari, Svetlana Ruseshvili, Fabio Lampert, and I are forming a research group called the Center for Ukrainian Studies, or in Portuguese, Núcleo de Estudos da Ucrânia. Our project, Bridging Ukraine and Latin America, a transnational call for decolonization, justice, and a grant by the Ukrainian Institute, and this seminar is part of that project. I will paste, or perhaps Samuel Vicente can do it, a form into the chat for anyone who wants to receive the Nucleus newsletter. Today, Professor Anna Osypchuk will discuss social cohesion and the search for justice in a wartime Ukraine based on data from 2022-2024. After her presentation, we will have time for some questions that can be posted on the chat in Portuguese. I will try a translation or English. So once again, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us, Anna.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for this opportunity to talk about, in many cases, it's not just what's going on in Ukraine, but it's also about how we research it and what questions we ask about that. And it's not often that I have this opportunity to talk to people in different parts of the world, because usually we're very much centered within European perspectives, and majority of the talks I've been given on the war in Ukraine and social cohesion, it's been centered around European institution, and I cherish this opportunity, and I'm really very thankful to talk to people on the other side of the world in quite a literate way. I would say that, for example, it's April here and it should be getting warmer, but for some reason we have snow outside of my window. So and as far as I know, you just are coming out of summer and you're in the middle of the what would be autumn season in your country. So, but still, like the problems and the question that interest us and that worry us are actually the same or very similar. And the question of social cohesion, it's no less important in Ukraine than in Brazil, as I'm sure. And I actually I've sent some data with presentations, and I'm now looking forward what's better to show, because I have some kind of let's say jointed presentation with the different data, but I also want to make a quick preface for all this. For the last 4 years, or 5 years, I've been a research director at the School for Policy Analysis. That is a think tank within the university. So I not just teach, I also heavily involved in research, and what's more, in a policy-oriented research. So we do something empirically, we research different questions, and then we make policy proposition for decision makers, and both on the national level, or let's say at local level, national level, and also we work on several, you probably have heard of Horizon project, that is a European project of European Union, which concerning the kind of, let's say, in our sphere, in sphere of social sciences, and political science, it's about common European problems and the questions of foreign policy, common security, and so on. So I've been involved in, and also the questions of democracy, democratization, support of democracy, which is connected to European security and foreign policies, especially in regard to Ukraine. But if talking about national level policies, then our focus has been on the policies toward temporary occupied territories. And here I should do a small preface. For Ukrainians, we usually get rather angry when we hear that the war started in 2022, because that is a full-scale invasion that started in 2022. For us, the war started already 11 years ago, and it started in 2014 with Russia moving into Crimea, annexing and then occupying the Crimean Peninsula, and then occupying certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, or regions, as we call it. Of course, it hasn't been a full-scale warfare then. That's why we refer it to anti-terrorist operation, especially the actions in the east of Ukraine, in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, where the majority of warfare was taking place, was very limited, and Russia used proxies heavily there. So basically, we've been in this conflict for already 10 years before that. And we had these occupied territories for which there was a need on the state level to decide how we deal with not territories as such, but what we do, how we support people there. How do you support those whom we called IDPs, internally displaced people who were pressured to leave? Yeah, what policies we do toward the citizens of Ukraine who continue to live in their houses, but that they are under occupation now? How to deal with different what we would now call on an international level war crimes, but what would deal with the cases of injustice, and so on and so forth. So there is a whole bunch of questions of different levels, from the demand for justice, search for truth, to the way how you pay pensions, do you recognize documents, how people, do you accept or how you provide people with stipends to scholarship to enter universities, how you support families, and so on and so forth. So there is a whole bunch of these questions that the state had to deal with, and our school was doing quite a lot of empirical research on what policies would be the most commendable, and also what are Ukrainians at the rest of their territory attitudes to different policies, so what people think should be done. So we've been doing one is a part of policy research, like policy making research, and what is the best solution. But the other question is whether what would be people's attitude. What you can think about whether this or that measure or step undertaken by the state, what consequences it will have for the social cohesion, for the attitudes, for the how people feel about situation, so on and so forth. So, of course, this kind of research with the full-scale invasion, it's translated into post-conflict research in a way of how we think about supporting people. We as Ukrainians, what things unite us, what disunite us, and what also should be the policies regarding the territories, particularly that's been occupied and then deoccupied. We have, on one hand, we have more occupied territories now, but we have less occupied territories than we had this time of the year 3 years ago. So parts of Ukrainian territory has been deoccupied after the start of the full-scale aggression. So and there is a whole question of even if the territory was occupied for months or 2 months or 3 months, you already could feel the result of that. And it's already changed people's life. And also we have parts of the territories where warfare is going, and I'm not touching here the military component, I'm touching here the political, social, the component of the demand for justice, like the rebuilding of the communities, and all these different policies. So in one way, we've been utilizing our research that we've done previously. On the other hand, we actually have more topics now to research. Unfortunately, I would really, I would like less, but still it is as it is. And we found that the question of social cohesion is of particular importance, and it shows that like the more social cohesion you have, the easier it is for you to live in a community. The more vibrant and comfortable environment it is, the better attitudes and better question toward and from the local authorities and so on you have. So we all would prefer to live in a socially cohesive environment. It also directly influences your ability to resist and to engage into political action, because for a vibrant civil society, you would prefer a society with higher levels of social cohesion, because that will give a better engagement for everyone, to be more inclusive, to let everyone to be able to take part in a deliberative democracy, in deciding how to make a decision and so on. So basically, it is very important for the process of civic engagement on one hand. On the other hand, it's also very important for the question of your attitudes toward your institutions, of resistance, as I said, of resilience, as we kind of very much like this word now. But indeed, resilience is very important, and the more social cohesion basically is about solidarity on some level, solidarity and trust. So it's not just solidarity and trust, but it's kind of a starting point at some level. I would touch on the other points as well. So it is very important that we understand that if we have this solidarity and trust, they are the key instruments to community and civil society to be able to do something, to like even to influence or make a positive impact on authorities, for example, or to push for some action, or to resist or to be resilient. So that's why we think that these questions are of utmost importance, particularly as we firsthand experienced the importance of resilience in different levels, from the personal resilience and psychological personal resilience to resilience of institutions and of the country, of how important it is if you face a full-scale invasion. So we are trying to look at what's been going on in Ukraine, how we can measure it. And of course, there is a lot of, if you've been reading on this topic, you probably noted that there is a lot of discussion. People debate how to research resilience, not resilience, social cohesion, and there is a lot of indicators and measurements. And by background, I'm sociologist, and so we are very much into this conceptualization, and then you translate it into operatives, into indicators, into different concepts that you measure or that you discuss in a qualitative interviews and so on. So, or you find some senses from what people told you and then goes back to concepts. So what is very important in social cohesion that we would try to pinpoint and measure, that is the question of trust. And particularly in Ukraine, we focused on interpersonal trust, on how much I trust another person or the people in the communities that I live in. You may ask me here why we're not focusing on or why are we not talking about institutional trust or trust in politicians? Because our political theory and a lot of, especially institutional theories, also in sociology, tells us a lot about the importance of institutional trust for democracy. But the thing is that if you really go and measure trust in institutions and ask people whether you trust or whom you trust, the answer might surprise you in many cases. You would discover that in a lot of democracies, institutions are not that trusted, really. Or particular institutions are not that trusted in a particular moment. That people think that institutions are important, and it's very important to have this institution and to have it functional. They are kind of very much for having this institution, to this idea of this institution. But in a particular moment, they might not really trust it a lot, or they might kind of downscale it. And particularly, that is a situation of Ukraine where for years, when institutional trust has been measured, only few institutions really, if you ask which institution you trust and then ask which institution you distrust, and you count the balance, and you have this plus and minus. So only few institutions really had a positive balance. That's been church, there's been army after 2014, not before that. And also church as an institution in general, the idea of the church, not a particular church, because there's been at least 4 or 5 churches in Ukraine, different institutions. So it's the church as the kind of at the institution of religion, whatever religion I'm associate with or I think is important. So it's not a particular type of the church. It's not a particular name. There is army after 2014, and there is, depending on how you distinguish, there will be either 1 or 2 institutions of civil society. If you talk about civil society, the whole of NGOs, that will be then one. If you distinguish volunteers from civil society and NGO, there will be both volunteers and NGOs will be trusted, and so on. At some moments, media have some trust, but not when it's a middle of political campaign. So it's really fluctuates. So all other institutions are in the minus. But that is not to say that they are not important and that people think that they should be dismantled. No. So that is important distinction, that if we talk just about trust and if you talk about institutional trust, there is always a question, what is meant by that? What is under that? What does it mean? Yeah. So, and what is also important, that after the full-scale invasion, suddenly, overnight almost, because there was a poll done 2 weeks before the full-scale invasion, and there was a poll done in the beginning of the March. Suddenly institutional trust skyrocketed to the degree where institution that never has been trusted in Ukraine, people said that they trust in them. So does it mean that something radically changed with these institutions in a positive way? No, of course not. It just means that people recognized the importance and that this institution is at this moment is acting, and we are not are to criticize it at this particular moment. So that is very important. And that's why we are not touching, for example, institutional trust and this dimension of trust in our research. We are not, I know other people who also have their own measurements of social cohesion. They are also not touching institutional trust here, because that is another bunch of issues concerned here. But we ask about interpersonal trust, whether you trust your neighbors, people around you in the community, whether people should be trusted. And there are also, so that is one dimension. Another dimension that we ask, it is an attitude to different types of people, or different cohorts of people. And of course, it is basically a question of, if I identify as a certain person of certain background and so on, whether I will trust people outside of my referent group, of the group that I belong to. And you probably all know of, I'm sure that probably some of you even worked with the scales of Bogados-like scale, of Likert-like scales, with different groups. And usually you put ethnicities, religion there. In Ukraine, the question of ethnicity or nationality, the question that we do not ask about race, because racially Ukraine is a very, like many other European countries, it's a very mono-racial country. So basically our main questions are about ethnicities, and there you have a lot of bench. And even then, ethnicity is understood as nationality, which is first understood as political thing, although with some exceptions. So, for example, there is usually a bunch of stereotypes and prejudice attached to Roma people, for example. So typical question you would ask, that would be about people with different ethnicities, people with different religion. We added also different regional divides, if there are any, or different, at least that is what is relevant for Ukraine. It's been before the 2014, there's been a lot of talk about regional divide that's been important in Ukraine, although it's a lot of stereotypes here. that could be a question of political citizenship, yeah, and identification, not citizenship like your passport, but political civic identity, you know, how you identify. Either you pro European integration or you pro Russian integration and so on. So that's been the question that's been dividing Ukraine before the 2014 and particularly before the full-scale invasion. And what of our concern to us, the researchers, is whether new divides are coming up. So whether there are new gaps that could be discovered. Whether, for example, there is a particular attitudes toward IDPs, internally displaced people from occupied territories, that could influence how these people are treated. Whether there is a question of different attitudes toward people who went to European Union before or abroad in general, although majority went to European Union because of the full-scale invasion and not returned. And this is one of the concern for the social cohesion measurements and for in general for policies of this social maintaining social cohesion in the country, is that what is seen now that it is growing probably resentment, and that is a very strong word here, but growing tension toward people who went abroad after the full-scale invasion and haven't returned while they have place to return. So the thing that if I'm from Kyiv, and Kyiv is not occupied, not bombed down, and if I were, for example, if I didn't return, there will be, I would feel this attitude toward me to some level, that people think that I'm not doing something right, I should have returned. Yeah, there's growing tension, yeah. While, for example, if I'm pro Bakhmut is the city that's been very active warfare going on. You probably heard about that. So basically, it's boomed down. It's a war, though. It's a war zone there. Even if someone wanted, they couldn't return there. So if such people stay abroad, there is no tension to them. So in our qualitative and quantitative surveys, we try to ask people what type of attitudes they have to different people who, in surveys, it's of course this collection of variance is very limited. It's a Likert scale and just general categories, but in interviews and in other types of research, in focus groups, we've been more detailed here, and you could go more depth down, because on the surface it's not a negative attitude. It's what we discovered, that it's a neutral negative where you should have a positive attitude. So for social cohesion, neutral attitude is a bad thing. You should have positive attitude. Yeah? If you have neutral, then you have a problem. Yeah. Of course, if you have negative, like no one is, of course you are expected to have negative attitudes toward, like, I don't know, Russians, for example, of Belarus people, but that is another matter. Yeah. So, and of course, it's also what is important, that we are asking about categories here, about attitude toward a category of people. It's not toward a particular person. So one can still have a particular friend or particular person they communicate with, whom they know, probably not communicate, or whom they know and whom they think should be accept, yeah, out of these general attitudes. So when we talk about social cohesion in this way, it's about this general attitude, this masses of people. It's not about a particular person. That's why, for example, it's easy to understand. How some people say that they don't like homosexual, or they don't think that homosexual people should have full rights. At the same time, they might have a gay friend and be friends with them. So this is for what is matters for us is not whether they are friends with a particular person, is their general attitude toward a category. And that is important here. And also another thing that you should kind of take into consideration with talking about particular data is that as researchers in social science, how we obtain our information. We ask people questions. Yeah, so it's a bit of methodology here, and as all sociologists, I'm pretty much like talking about methodology at some point. So we ask questions, and unlike in a popular, probably you've heard Dr. House, and he had this saying that everybody lies. And we like to cite it. But in reality, what you discover as a sociologist is actually that it's easier to tell the truth. It's just that you have to understand that when people are saying something, or they're telling you something which is not factually correct, they're not necessarily lying in a way. For example, if I ask you, do you think that it's a bad thing to lie? You will probably say yes. Does it mean that you never lied? No, it doesn't. I mean, because at some point in our life, we all hid the truth in some way. Yeah. So if I ask someone what movies and films you think the state should sponsor, you probably will get the list of very highbrow educational kind of classical list and so on. No one probably would mention that the state should sponsor a sitcom they watched yesterday. So the thing is that what I'm getting at, there is always a distance between people's disposition, a normative thing I report about my behavior, and my actual behavior. Like I might like something but not do it, or I might dislike it but still do it in some way. So of course we have to understand what answers are socially appreciated. Yeah, so of course we all want people to think that we look the best, or to form a positive opinion of us, the best possible, and we will talk to that way. But in the end, a line requires, or like systematically presenting you a different picture in an interview or in a survey requires additional effort that most people are not really willing to give. That's one thing. So basically, for the methodological matter, it's easier to assume that, particularly if you have these control questions, it's easier to assume that overall people are sincere, although they want to present the best possible picture of them. Yeah, so you accept this social appreciation side, and you accept the sincerity. The other thing is that people, especially it comes in interview and focus groups, people actually like to talk, and they really cherish opportunity to be able to talk, because in the interview you have someone listening to you 1 hour, 2 hours, very with empathy, with understanding. So we rarely really got that in our ordinary lives. So in this way, keeping these things in mind, you actually have to understand the limits, what you can discover in your talking to people. Yeah, because no one, of course, people won't tell you that I think that everyone of these ethnicity should be kind of eliminated. But they would put in other words, probably similar attitude, particularly if the conversation will be empathically done. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, that we really are able to get into, and if people have strong opinions that, for example, the jobs that are currently in Ukraine should be only given to people who are able to work offline, and this is, and you consider that eliminates those who outside of Ukraine and, for example, can only engage online. Yeah, and you can even particularly ask about that. People would be really free to ask about that. So that's not a problem. So that's why it's really we see these different tensions, and although although usually we would expect that everyone again won't present this perfect opinion of themselves and this picture of themselves, we still have these situations where people voice really their dissent, their tension, their dissatisfaction, particularly if they think that some types of behavior or practices shouldn't be accepted. So if someone feels that this practice shouldn't be accepted, they will be probably very vocal in the interview with you. So this really helps with our research. And what else to say? That you have a lot of I've sent you a lot of data. I just want to notice that probably what comes out of data also. This is important. Like why I've got so much into details, because we just not asked what attitude you have towards these people. We also asked pretty often what you think should be done to help them, or what measures should be indicated. And the person may say that, well, I have good attitude, but then you ask about policies and particular steps, and you understand that it doesn't really match this positive attitude. Yeah, so or so there could be a discrepancy here. And again, it doesn't mean that people are lying. No, they're not. It just that the positions are complex, and it's not just a simple plus and minus, black and white matter. Another question that comes up, and probably I will then stop, and probably Q&A would be good. Or if we go from a particular question that you might have, or particular question, I could comment on a particular question. That the question of justice and finding justice, this demand for justice, is appeared. We see how important it is on all levels. So it's basically justice understood very widely. It's not just about law and order, I would say. Yeah, justice is also about what is just for me in this situation and what is not. You hear probably a lot of Ukrainians talking about just peace, and that they will recognize only a just peace. So the peace deal, for example, that are not recognized as a just, won't be supported by Ukrainians. And I don't know any Ukrainians who like to be at war. I think it wasn't our choice, and we don't like it. We don't like fighting. But on the other hand, I know that probably Ukrainians are the strongest critics of any peacemaking initiatives the Trump government, for example, have, because we do not trust in these initiatives. Yeah, and that comes back to the question of justice, because we do not see any deals that is brought as the just deals. So the justice is a question not just about prosecuting those who committed war crimes, although it is an important part, particularly for deoccupied territories where unfortunately there was a lot of atrocities being done there. And of course people want to see justice served in these cases, but justice is also about anti-corruption efforts, about why there shouldn't be, why people feel so strong about any report about corruption, because they do not think that it is a just behavior. Justice is also about criticizing the government for some decision, because this particular decision is not seen as just. And I also should say that Ukraine is a country with very small Gini index. We have we don't have really a big levels of inequality. We have our share of a couple of oligarchs and have our share of wealthy people, but really, like if you just take the index to measure it, we are pretty much the country that really have a Gini index on par with Scandinavian countries, in European Scandinavian countries. So we have a very like small distance, like and also a lot of this and a lot of this is translated into what people think is due and what they expect from the state. Yeah, so they expect a certain level of educational propositions, of medical treatment, and so on and so forth. And that is receiving it is also understood as a just thing. So that is, I'm getting here, that justice is very important. And with the war, active war going on, it's become even more important. So when you start talking to a person, probably the first thing they would talk to that how just it is, or how justice is important. Although you may find it a bit strange, because what is in core of this war is the struggle. It's understood as an existential struggle and struggle for freedom. And usually theory teaches us that freedom and justice are in a kind of inner tension, but that is, the experience showed that it's not necessary, and it's not always understood at the opposites. So I would probably, stop here.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. We have some questions. They are on this QAN. Can you see it? If you
I see the links to to
oh,
two
no,
documents.
well, I can.
I can try to open the document.
No, they are not
No.
the document.
Uh,
If you I don't I don't know how I'm so clumsy. Can you see the chat?
yeah, I
Raise
see the chat,
hand,
but I
share,
see
and key AA. Q and
Hyundai. Yes, but then
yes.
I see NVM suas perguntas pela Q. I'm sorry, I don't know the the. I never
No,
studied Portuguese.
no.
The
I will make the questions. Um, so the first one is from our colleague Svetlana Ruseshvili. I don't know if she would like to make the questions herself, because I could allow her. and she asks, how is the Ukrainian society dealing with the greatest challenge, which is maintaining social and national cohesion with a huge part of its population being outside of the country, and while the wartime fosters nationalistic nativist discourses and attitudes? Is there an alternative political project to include those millions of refugees in Europe, the IDPs and the minorities inside Ukraine, without appealing to a nationalist narrative? Could you understand?
Yeah.
There is a
there are like how I understand there are several questions, and I will try to address all of them. For one,
yes.
about the sorry, about the huge and it's really huge. It's a lot of population outside of Ukraine. But if you ask me how much or how many, or rather, I would be really hard pressed to tell you the exact number because the estimates goes from 2 million to 7 millions. Commendable and it's still a lot. Like 2 is a lot and 7 is a lot, but it's different numbers. So basically we don't really know how much or how many people are outside. If you more or less reliable data show that it's like if you do an estimate and count different data and especially compare with the people registered consistently as under temporary protection, you would get to the number around 4 millions probably. And that is mainly women with children. So that is not families. There are some families, but I mean, there is not full families. Yeah, so part of their family is left in Ukraine. And one of the problem why you may ask why there is no exact number is particularly because people are moving back and forth. So what's more, these children that is outside of Ukraine, they continue, in majority of cases, they continue to attend online Ukrainian schools. So there is a special program that our ministry do for them. They allow for these online schools. So they basically goes to both schools in the country they're in, and they continue in Ukrainian school. For different reasons. One of them is it's more beneficial to them to get a Ukrainian, especially if they are older children, Ukrainian certificate of the school with and pass Ukrainian exams, and then with that to enter universities in other countries, then to finish the school in the country they are staying in. So they have more opportunities with Ukrainian documents. Although it may sound strange for you, but we know that the school systems are very rigid usually and are very connected to social inequality and class and so on. And in many cases, for many people, this is a choice about a very good school in Ukraine and like whatever you end up as an immigrant under temporary protection in the country that is hosting you, that probably the quality might not be on par. So basically, these people are not really losing the connection because majority of them are going back and forth, if not to and from Ukraine. So of course there is a question how to maintain and how not to lose them, how to make sure that they will return. But the key question here is until the war is stopped and it's actually on the table, like the question of return is put on the table, all talk about return is an abstract talk. So people will be dealing with so what you get in the polls now doesn't necessarily correspond to what will be there later. And also it depends on the countries, on what policies this country that are providing temporary protection now, what they are willing and wanting to do, and what our government will negotiate with them. Because of course our government is interested in all these people returning, so they are not interested in providing, like switching this temporary status to something more permanent, while these hosting countries might be interested in at least some of these people being a permanent settlers into those countries. That is what's about. What about externally displaced people? The question about nationalistic view, I would say that the discourse about them is much more exaggerated than it really exists in Ukraine. That would be like flat out starting point in my answer. If you look at the polls before the full-scale invasion in 2019, for example, 2020, 2018, you will notice that around 90% of population identify as Ukrainians as a civic identity. So they might be of different ethnicity, and they might even remark it, but more so around 85 identify as ethnic Ukrainian. Although here you also should understand that it's also more about political orientation than no one, like you can't distinguish ethnic Ukrainian from ethnic Belarusian, for example, just by looking at them. It's impossible. And so you have to understand that in many cases, what people tell you about their ethnicity and about their language they speak at home, not at home, about their native language, is the issue of political orientation and political identity. It's not some blood and soil thing. And what we saw from the start of the war in 2014 is that more and more people identify with the Ukrainian state to the level where its numbers over 85%. After the full-scale invasion, that is even more. That is more than 90%, 95 even, identify as Ukrainian. So, of course, you might at the same time have a person from minority who identify as Ukrainian, like let's say Hungarian minority or Crimean Tatar or Jewish or different. Or, that is probably the biggest that we have. But there are some Greek minorities. Of course, you might ask about Russians here. There are a small number of people who identify as ethnic Russian and continue to identify this way, but it's less than 1%. And and again, you have to understand what stays behind it. It's the way where it's not a measure of your blood or skin or whatever. It's about political orientation, political identity. So we might talk about some radical right But I won't say that there is more radical right in Ukraine than in any other country, and radical right is not really popular. They lost all election. They never got into parliament, into any local even structures. So, of course, you have the rise of radicalism where you have a warfare with any country, but I wouldn't say that it's a thing on state level. What's more than you also what has really surprised me in here probably is how, for example, Zelensky is understood as a person having nationalist views, while in Ukraine he's anything but that. He's actually constantly criticized within Ukraine for not having enough national sentiment. So if, let's say, there will be elections tomorrow, which majority of Ukrainians are against, and there will be a candidate who viewed as more nationally conscious, let's say, for example, Zaluzhny would win. So there are a couple. So the only candidates who possibly can win the elections compared to Zelensky are even more into this only Ukrainian identity. But I should again emphasize that this only Ukrainian identity is understood in a political and civic matter, which doesn't say that you have to have a certain religion. You could be Muslim and not Orthodox. That doesn't say that you should be by your blood Ukrainian. You could be Crimean Tatar or Jew, for example. It's the question of your civic identity. So I'm not. So I think that the matter of this nationalist view is really this disinformation, misinformation discourse very much what it is, and it's really weaponized by well, I could outright say Russian propaganda, because that's one of the favorite topic to discuss. But that's not the reality. I live here in Ukraine.
We have more questions. I pasted them on the chat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. To help you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Feel free to comment whichever you want.
Okay. I think I addressed the first two.
Yes.
How the full-scale influence rise. Well, it's about the same thing. It's actually what is interesting that extreme right in Europe has been very much against helping Ukraine and militarizing Europe. We can there's a whole another debate why it is that way. But while you would probably expect them to be really support of militarization and building common defense, weaponizing Europe, spending more on defense, in getting involved into real action or whatever you call it, the reality that the far right in majority of European countries, the majority of far right has been against it. So that's we can again debate why it is that way. Some again see the Russian influence here, because it's not a secret that Russia has been supportive of different far rights as the tool to destabilize Europe. But I don't think that it's only because of that. I also think that because basically any wing party, either right wing or left wing party, currently in Europe are the populist parties. So they will try to utilize rhetoric that is, in many cases, you see this example of rhetoric in US, in kind of banking on issues that are closest to the particular person, which are the issues of course, economy. What is interested all of us is economy, is what's going on in my neighborhood. So that's why the most popular issues are this question of migrants into Europe, migrants who are coming and taking away your job. And why it should interest a person, because this migrant taking away their job and thus lessening the income, and thus and government is not helping the economy. So that's a typical right-wing rhetoric. It continues to that degree. It continues that in many ways, right-wing rhetoric currently in European countries that they should be more isolationist. So in the way, again, a clear parallel to Trump. You can look at AfD rhetoric. It's very similar, like that we shouldn't care about what happened anywhere. We shouldn't spend all this money on defense, on military, on common security. We should look what's happening here and not think about European security. So that's the typical rhetoric. Okay. Can you please yeah, well, and then from the perspective of Ukrainian state, if refugees return, it will be a good thing. So basically, of course, not to war zones, yeah, but to the territories that are not that affected. So the question, and what's more, it's also from perspective that this tension that I mentioned, tension in the attitudes of average Ukrainians living in Ukraine toward those who haven't returned while they have a place to return. If you ask majority of people in Ukraine, they should that temporary they're all right with the stopping of all these programs. So, of course, that is not probably in the best interest of this particular people. But that is not overall Ukraine. If there is any ceasefire, especially a continuous ceasefire, Ukraine would want all these people back. So in this way, it's not a problem that they for Ukrainian state and for a lot of people in Ukraine. It's not a problem that they are told to return. Moreover, I would even say that probably Ukraine would push and argue for not continuing temporary protection over a certain period of time, so that people would be pressed to return. Okay, then another question.
Yes. I'm trying to copy them here because
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I think
I would think that it's I would define that as a convergent identity of Ukrainians, but it also demands on your definition of what is a convergent identity. Um, uh, I would say that being Ukrainian is currently associated with, first and foremost, with the state. So with not necessarily this political state, but with the existence of Ukraine as a sovereign country. So if you do not support Ukraine and its existence, then people would challenge your identification. But if you support it, and particularly if again, we are talking here about what is important, particularly if you speak the language, doesn't necessarily have to be mother tongue or the language you speak at home. It could be different. Or you could be, and it's not, it also goes, for example, for diaspora Ukrainians. So it's Ukrainians, for example, who, you also have such people in Brazil, Ukrainians who live for several generations, and they might lose the language already, but some of them actually return, or some of them even fight in the army. Who am I to say that they're not Ukrainians, in a way? So they would be recognized, and is it identity? This identity, as we study, is always a two-way thing. It's not just, we like to think that it's how I identify myself, but it's also there is also the fact that this identification have to be supported by other side. So if I identify as someone by those people do not accept me, there is a problem. So in this way, that's what I mean, that so in this way, this identity is always discursive, and I mean that there is a two sides to that. Yeah. So identities should be supported by the group who I think I belong to. If not, then this is a question for management of identities, as we know. So it could be different religion, although if we talk about typical Ukrainian, at least knows Ukrainian language, not necessarily speaks it very fluently, have this basic understanding of something that we call culture, Ukrainian culture. Yeah, like I don't know, like from the culinary dishes to the to what how you celebrate something. But again, you might be a Jew with different tradition and still identify. So in the same way that majority of Ukrainians are Orthodox, but that doesn't mean that there are no Roman Catholic or Muslim or like, I don't know, atheist or Buddhist. And particularly as we take this religion in Ukraine, as in many European countries, has become a matter of cultural thing, cultural background, and not really a everyday religious practice. So I would say that, of course, I would define Ukrainian culture as Orthodox culture, but that is a different orthodoxy than for example, in Russia or than in Georgia, than in Greece. We all have our own versions in everyday practices. But these everyday practices are not religious currently. Yeah, so it's about like how you talk, like words we say, how we celebrate. Like there will be Easter in to week and week and a half. Yeah, and there is already how it will be celebrated, although only probably 1/3 of the people who identify as Christian in Ukraine actually go every 2 weeks to a church or every month to a church. Yeah, so we have this, what we mean as a culturally religious, so which is not really your everyday behavior. So we have these stereotypes about what it means to be Ukrainian, but basically it comes to the association with the Ukraine as a political reality and this idea of Ukraine. And of course, being Ukrainian is being for democratic country. So I don't know any Ukrainian who want, or it's very much we've done a research. I haven't cited it, but we've done a research on basic values or the so-called democratic values. And for Ukrainians, basic freedoms are more important than economic stability, for example, on average. So they will choose they wouldn't choose a strong leader instead of who promise economic stability for the sake of stability. And we see this through the everyday choices through the last 30 years. That is not to say that it's not necessary, it's just a constatation of the fact. Yeah. So this understanding of that no one have the right to dictate to me and to decide for me is very much ingrained in Ukrainian culture, I would say. I don't like the word mentality. I would say culture and identification. And it's not always a good thing, It's ordering your class or communicating with your children very problematic, especially if you know the right answer and you want to, especially like in some business matters or whatever in everyday life, you might really don't like it in many cases. That everyone always argue and you have to spend a lot of time on persuasion and on this constant kind of challenging of opinions. That is not necessarily a good thing, but it is something that kind of for Ukrainians to identify as Ukrainian is to accept this reality in a way. So this kind of political, we would call it political culture. Yeah, this feature of political culture that and we've seen it in a way that it's something that make you oppose the power that is stronger than you, like in a way because you don't want to leave where this power will dictate. So that's again, you may argue that it's not very good thing for survival strategy, probably in a way. Okay. I would say, like, for the last question, I would say that I don't know about if we talk that Russians support anything in Ukraine, then there is a question of how much these Russians we have, and the polls from Soviet Union time, from 1989, show that there is 17% of Russians in all over Ukraine. And then this percentage go down the major reason for this percentage to going down was the people re-identifying themselves. As I'm saying, there is no, it's always self-reporting, and there is no way you would distinguish a Russian or Ukrainian just by looking at them. So basically, what we actually seen through 30 years since, or 35 years since 1998, 88, 89, yeah, 1989. It's that this re-identification as Ukrainian. So we have a very, if you look at the polls, because we don't have census from that time, but if you look at the representative polls from, as I already cited, 2019, for example, you would discover only around 4 or 5% of ethnic Russian, or those people who identify as ethnic Russians. So that is not to say that they're ethnic Russians. In reality, actually, they could be, if you would follow the genealogy, they could be anyone. But so the question, back to this question, how many people were talking, like, does it matter what 5% in some region identify or want to? It's not like they might want, they might not want. So basically, there's no way to verify such claims. And we from the start know that there is no Russian there. Like, they are Ukrainian citizens who actually, if they are of age, who voted for Ukrainian independence en masse in 1991. There was, in the referendum on Ukrainian independence, over 90% voted for the independence, and including in regions as Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson, particularly in Zaporizhia and Kherson. It was close to 95, even more. It was around 85 something in Donetsk and Luhansk. It was around 16 Crimea, at least. So the thing is that I don't know where, like, from the start, this claim isn't grounded in reality, and also there is no way they could have checked in any way. They didn't hold any referendum, a real referendum. There was military presence there. There was, if we talk about actually what's going on in these territories, on occupied territories, it's a regime where people are not really open with what they can tell to their neighbors. So of course they will vote for anything you want. They don't want Secret Service coming to their houses. So about the ethnic relations, as I'm saying, like, I'm really always astonished, like, even if you take Soviet census, there is no significant number of ethnic Russians in these regions. So I would say that I never heard of any ethnic conflicts there. If there is ethnic conflict where you actually can ascribe, and it's really, is there prejudice against Roma people? yeah, as in many other European countries, I'm sorry, I don't know how it is in whether you have it in Brazil. Uh, there could be instances of anti-Semitism. There could be instances from, for example, in some Kherson regions, there are Turks Meskhetians settlements historically for 100 plus years. So there and there could be some tensions sometimes, especially if it's this connected to different local business things of local governance things or youth conflicts. So there's been tensions like that. There's been tensions sometimes in Crimea. Before the annexation, there have been tensions between Crimean Tatars who came after being deported, who came back, and the local population. Whether it's only ethnic, I wouldn't say, because it's not just about ethnicity. It's a whole thing. So, but it's not systematic, and these things are not systematic, and they're not structurally supported. And usually, it's regarded, if there is any conflict like that, it is regarded as a problem where a state would try to interfere. But I've never heard about any Russian-Ukrainian conflicts, particularly because, as I am saying, it's a arbitrary thing. You can't distinguish. It's not something you can distinguish. It's only you can just take person's word for that. And as we know, in ethnic conflicts, it's not about how the person self-identify. It's how the group identify that person. So in a way, you can't really, because all these people will be on the will be they are easily accepted as long as they self-identify. So there is kind of, yeah, I mean that would be my answer. I think that, but it's something that Russian propaganda likes to talk about. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, that's probably
Oh,
I addressed all of them.
I have a last question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
And I have just seen that someone raised a hand. I don't know how to open. Oh, but I will make my question before that. Katerina Sergatskova, director
Yeah,
of 2402 Foundation. I don't know if
I know.
uh,
Sergatskova, yeah.
uh, yeah, wrote in the Kyiv Independent that the reduction of resilience programs across Europe, including Ukraine, poses a significant risk to Ukrainian democracy, and that these cuts have hindered essential efforts to support Ukrainians. Do you agree that these cuts weaken civil society, which has been instrumental in supporting Ukrainian sovereignty?
Yeah, well, I agree, especially in a short run, in a short, like short time lens, because uh, there's been a lot of programs to support civil society, not just like, give grants to people to do whatever they want, no, but do an actual programs that is, and in many cases, civil society also took over roles that usually you would expect state to do. For example, to provide psychological support in a communities that's been deoccupied. It's been mainly done by civil society organization on foreign funding, because Ukrainian state, while recognizing that it's important, lacks resources at the current moment to do that. For example, the support of farmers hugely had been done through grants to civil society over the last 2 years or 3 years. So it's not something you would typically expect as done something through civil society. So I want to emphasize here that supporting civil society is not just there's just about right activist, civil right activist, or human right activist, or like some policy making think tanks like we are at the university and so on. So it's a lot of programs with a very real impact. It's also, for example, a lot of programs for veterans or for IDPs. They've been done through civil society, where actually we even call it like where have this word outsource used as what civil society is doing toward the state. So the state is actually outsourcing, has been outsourcing a lot of its actions and obligations to civil society. And then civil, even in such sectors as energy, farming, and agriculture. So then, if you suddenly cut this support in one day, how it's been done by the closure of USAID, for example, then you have a big problem, which I don't think that it's that critical a problem, but I think it's a problem for it's a significant problem because it's also what this funding also allowed is, for example, for existence of independent media. Of course, you may argue that they are dependent on the grantor and so on, but the fact that they are independent from either oligarchs or the state or political parties. So they might have this agenda of the donor, although it's very if any of you ever worked, it's rather vague. This agenda is rather vague, yeah, in a way. But it's not dependent, like it's not have to toe the party line on to follow what this particular oligarch want or big business want to say. So the same goes for any other initiative. So basically, now to survive, you either have to depend on European donors funding, or you have to depend on benefactors, and these benefactors may have their agenda, or you may have to depend on crowdfunding. But important thing currently is that majority of effort that Ukrainians do is actually aimed toward the military and helping military. So in a situation as it is now, there is not enough spare resources. So in a short time, especially short to mid-time situation, it is a big problem, and it is also, and because it kind of put civil society in a dependent position toward business, for example. That's why, and toward the political parties. That's why it is also a threat to democracy.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was amazing. I like it very much. I think that the audience like it too. We are very grateful for your time and for sharing with us your work and your experience. I hope we can keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
I saw in your CV that you like opera, and so
Yes.
more than one thing in common.
Yeah, yeah. And I've been just on Sunday to Tosca,
Oh, I
nation
have an
opera.
Ukrainian cousin that is an opera singer.
Ah,
She
wow.
lives in Austria. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. We have a very good opera. Like Ukrainians actually think that they have a very good opera singers,
They
and
like to sing.
yeah, yeah. Like to think that we compare ourselves to Italians, and we actually prefer Italian operas. But
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and it's been an honor to me and a privilege to be able to talk to you, to share some information, and I would very much like to have some continuation. Or I'm always happy and ready to talk about our work and to talk more about my country. So thank you very much, and thank you for your support and
Thank you.
attention.
So we're finishing this seminar today, and I don't I'm not sure if we have seminar next week, but Sergio, who is the coordinator of the seminars, can clarify this question better than me. Thank you again. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.